I'll just wait a minute or two and then I'll start explaining to you all what's going on. I'm John Purcell. I'm the chair of this session, which has been held on behalf of Kilkenny County Council. So we've almost 100 people registered for this event. So I'm just going to wait while people are still coming in. It takes time to just admit them all through the lobby. So then we will get underway. If we could just ask people to mute their microphones, please. Just in the early part, there will be an opportunity later on for questions. People can ask questions, or equally, people can use the comments section. You'll see an icon at the top of your screen there, which is like a speech bubble. If you click on that, you'll be enabled to leave comments throughout or ask questions throughout the thing. Normally we had one of these in Graignamanagh about 2 weeks ago, and there was almost 60 people at it, if I'm not mistaken. And judging on that, it takes a short while for everybody to get on, because while unfortunately in COVID we've all made the transition to online meetings and virtual meetings, it's good to see the Irish habit of 7 o'clock actually meaning 7:10 still endures, and that COVID virus ain't going to kill that one off by the looks of things. So if you just bear with us, we've about 21 people in the meeting at the moment. So we'll be having a number of presentations. Just to give you the format for the evening is Dennis Malone, who's Senior Planner with Kilkenny County Council, will make an introduction, and then his colleague Nicholas Lowe, who's Senior Executive Planner with Kilkenny County Council, will give a presentation on the county core strategy. Dennis will talk some more about that, in particular reference to the Waterford area. And then we'll have a session of questions or observations where you can actually participate. And then we will wrap up the meeting. Based on the last time, we would expect the meeting to finish probably around 8:30. So if you've just joined us, you're very welcome. I'm John Purcell. I'm your virtual host for the next while. So we're just waiting at the moment while everybody checks in. We've had about almost 199 when I last checked had registered for this meeting. So we're just waiting for, I suppose, a bit of a quorum. So I'll keep ticking along until we get to a position where we can start. This is all part of Kilkenny County Council's process to develop the city and county development plan, which will cover the period 2021 to 2027. And Dennis will explain in more detail that process, but it's a multi-stage process, and this is one of the consultation periods. The next step is that the results of this consultation will go back, and the county manager will have an opportunity then to review the submissions, and will make a report to the elected members, who will then discuss and make amendments to it, and then the further amendments will go on public display, and there'll be a further opportunity for people to input in relation to the amendments, the proposed amendments, because ultimately the county development plan, while prepared and the public consultation is managed by the staff, it's the elected members who have the final say in relation to approval of the content of the plan. So I think at this stage we have 33 participants in the call. I don't know, Naomi Scully of Kilkenny County Council is doing air traffic control here. She keeps her eye on people who are circling the meeting and so on, and lets them in. Just a reminder, if you've joined us, you can use the comments box, which is at the top of your screen. Also, you'll see an icon there, which is like a raised hand. And that's for use when we get to the open part of the meeting, which will follow the presentations. And rather than have everybody speaking together, if you just raise your hand, which will indicate to us that you would like to make a contribution. Naomi, then I'll be tic-tacking with Naomi as to who wishes to talk, and we'll do our best to get round to everybody who wishes to make a contribution. Also, if you've just joined us, just to remind you that the comments that you make will be recorded, and we'll make sure that Kilkenny County Council are endeavouring to respond to all comments, and will register and record all comments. Just a reminder, you can see it probably on the top of your screen, but this meeting is being recorded. So if I could just say,
can't hear anyone.
Just mute your microphone perhaps at this stage. Don't know who that is. I'll keep talking over you just in case you're saying something of an extremely confidential nature. But it's best for everybody on the call if you just, because we know people are in domestic and home settings, so if you just keep yourself muted. It's also nice if people can see everybody else. So maybe the brave souls, when we kick off the meeting, people could let themselves be seen through unblocking their camera so that we can see. But that's not mandatory. You're not required to do it. But I know from being involved in past presentations that people making presentations find it easier when they can actually see who they're presenting to. This is the second in a series of public consultations that Kilkenny County Council has held. The last one was 2 weeks ago in Graignamanagh, and they're becoming something of a new way of doing business, but we've been able to get through it very speedily, and everybody's able to make an input. If you are making a verbal input, we would ask that people keep them as short as possible and to the point. Of course, we want full disclosure and full opportunity for people to make their points of view felt. But with this number of people on a meeting where we have approaching 50 people on the meeting as it is, it's just important we use enough time that we've got. And just a reminder to anyone who's just joined us, my name is John Purcell. My day job is I work for KCLR, Kilkenny Carlow local radio station. I also present a business programme at the weekends. And my role this evening is simply as chairperson to keep Master of Ceremonies, I suppose, to keep this event moving. Just a reminder to anyone who's joined us, it is being recorded. And so if you're uncomfortable with that, you can talk to any of the members of Kilkenny County Council. Just a reminder that the format of this evening is there'll be a number of presentations followed by a question and answer section where people will have the opportunity to make observations or ask questions. You can do that in two ways. You can use the speech bubble at the top of your screen and to put in a question, which we will get to as many of those as we can. But in the event that we can't get to those questions, somebody from Kilkenny County Council will endeavour to get back to you, and the questions or observations will be recorded as part of this process. When the question and answer session does start, if you would indicate your wish to speak by just raising your hand, which is using the hand icon which is on the top of your screen. It's 8 minutes after 7 now, so I'm gonna kind of keep talking for another 90 seconds or so, and then we'll kick off. But I suppose before that, I'd just like to formally welcome you all on behalf of Kilkenny County Council. As I said, my name is John Purcell. I'm just here as the chairman of this event. I have no role in the formulation of any policies in relation to any decisions or whatever, purely as the Master of Ceremonies for these round of public consultation meetings. There's a series of 5 in all at this stage. We had about 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting in Graignamanagh. This one is this evening to discuss the overall core strategy, which will comprise the draft city and county development plan, which covers the 6 years from 2021 to 27. And then on the 4th of February, which is next week, or sorry, Monday, the 1st of February, next Monday, this night week, there will be another consultation meeting on the economic development aspect of the plan, which includes retail strategy and tourism. Then on the 4th of February, the subject to be covered will be climate change, renewable energy and transport. And then on Monday, the 8th of February, the topic of that consultation is natural and built heritage. So just by way of introduction, this is part of the consultation process in the development of the City and County Development Plan, which will set out the Kilkenny County Council's policies and objectives for planning and sustainable development over the next 6 years. And just in relation to, and I'm learning more as this goes on, but this plan is informed by a range of national plans, policies and strategies relating to planning and development and so on. So all of that will be explained in more detail as we move through the presentation. So I'd just like to remind you all again that this meeting is being recorded. Ask people, if possible, to put their microphones on mute unless you are actually speaking. We'll have an opportunity for people to make contributions later on after the presentations, which are coming from Dennis Malone and his colleague Nicholas. If I could urge you, although it's not mandatory, but if you would like to let your camera show us who you are, particularly in the second half of the meeting, it does add to a feeling of being more like a proper meeting, because of course, unfortunately, due to the COVID restrictions, having a quote-unquote proper public meeting is impossible for the foreseeable future. So without further ado, and I'll be just popping in and out intermittently throughout until we get to the open session, I'd like to introduce you to Dennis Malone, who is going to talk to you just by way of introduction now. Dennis is the Senior Planner with Kilkenny County Council, and he's going to first give an overview and just a bit of the context and talk to you a bit about the process involved in the development of the plan. So without further ado, over to you, Dennis.
Thanks, John. As John said, Dennis Malone is my name. I'm the Senior Planner with Kilkenny County Council. And I'm just going to give you a quick intro to a bit of context for tonight's presentations. So a little bit about the introduction, what is a development plan, and partly around the process. So just bear with me a second now while I just share my presentation with everyone. Can everyone see that? Yeah, great.
Yeah, yes, Dennis, I think that's visible, yeah.
Yeah, so as the purpose, just we have the City and County Development Plan, so I'll just go quickly through the purpose of the meeting and then what is a development plan and why it matters. So introduction, purpose really of tonight's meeting is to engage with the members of the public and to explain the concept of development plan and to give the public an opportunity to provide comment on the plan on the night, and also to give them details on how they can make further comment during the process. And this will enhance, you know, the public participation in the process, all for the good of the making of the plan. So where are we now? Well, I've highlighted there in red, we're in stage 2 of making the draft. We're at the public consultation stage of the publication of the draft plan, and that will run for another about 6 to 7 weeks, I think, is up until the 12th of March, where we're taking formal submissions on the process. And after that, you'll follow along the line there, you'll see there will be a Chief Executive's report prepared on all those submissions, and that will go back to the full members of the council, full council members, for their consideration. And the likely event is that there will be material amendments to go on public display after that, which would bring us into stage 3, which is the line just below that. So stage 3, there'll be another round of public consultation with material amendments, and people could be able to comment on those at that stage as well. So what is a development plan? The development plan sets out a framework for the physical development of the future of the county. So it will cover the period up to from 2021 up to 2027. And for this development plan, the main themes through the plan are trying to transition to a low carbon and climate resilience county, the strengthening of rural communities, to have a strong economic base and enterprise innovation skills, and a compact growth the advocation of compact growth in all the settlements, enhanced amenity in both the rural and urban areas, and the protection of the natural and built heritage of the county and city. The structure of the plan itself is in two main volumes. Volume 1, as you can see on the left there, deals with the entire county, and then it sets the overarching policies both for the city and county as well. And then there's a separate volume dealing exclusively with the city plan, and that covers, you can see from the map there, I've just outlined what that area that covers. It's fairly tightly knit around the built area of the city. And along with those two volumes, there's a set of 14 appendices which cover some of the details, so background detail in terms of studies carried out, such as the retail strategy, which will go in forming the policies in the plan. Just a little bit on the hierarchy. The county development plan sits in a hierarchy of other plans. So at national level, we have a document called the National Planning Framework, which would have been developed in 2017. And after that, then we had the regional spatial economic strategies, which were prepared by each of the regional assemblies. So in our case, it would be the Southern Regional Assembly area, which we would be part of. So that was a document that was finished in January 2020. Are we okay? I think I lost my, hold on, I'll just get back. Somebody, I think I was,
Something
yeah,
has
we're back. So apologies
okay,
for that.
Yeah.
So as I was saying, the county development plan sits within a hierarchy of other plans: national plan, national planning framework, regional plan, as in regional spatial economic strategy, and then that devolves down into the county development plan and local area plans. And why is that important? Well, a lot of the national objectives are brought into the local county through the local county development plan. So things like climate action, climate mitigation, and so on are brought from national policy right down into the local level at county through the county development plan. So why does it matter? Well, the plan matters because it's a council's statement of planning policies and objectives, and this is critical to determining the location and form of development within the county and within the city. And as I said, it implements national policy at local level. So again, just that idea of a good example of that is climate change. We all hear about this more or less constantly every day. There's always something in the news about climate change and the effects. So trying to mitigate and adapt to climate change is one of the challenges in this new development plan. So just as John outlined there, tonight is the first of 4 open public sessions around the city and county development plan. And tonight, Nicholas will deal with the core strategy for the county in terms of population housing. So what the amount of population that we're trying to accommodate and where that will be allocated strategically. We have other meetings, as John said, on the 1st of February, dealing with economics, jobs, retail and tourism. On the 4th of February, climate change, renewable energy and transport. And then on the 8th of February, we have heritage, built and natural environment, placemaking. So I hope you can join us for some of those meetings and be part of the public consultation process on the plan. So I'll hand over to Nicholas. I'll just stop sharing the screen. Yeah. So thank you for your attention there.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm just trying to share my screen here.
Okay, Nicholas.
Can everybody see?
Just joined us. If you just mute your microphones. I'm John Purcell. I'm the Master of Ceremonies, for want of a better word. at the moment. Nicholas Lowe, who's a senior planner with Kilkenny County Council, will make a presentation. Then Dennis will be back to continue on, and then we will have an open session where you can ask questions throughout. If you'd like to put questions in, you can use the speech bubble at the top of your screen there, so you don't have to wait till the end to type in a question. You can put it in now and we'll endeavour to get to it later on. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Nicholas.
Thank you, John. I just want to confirm, can everybody see my screen?
Okay, I think so. Yeah.
You can all see my screen, okay. Thank you. I just want to talk to you tonight about the core strategy as contained in the county and the city plan. I don't think the intention here is to interrogate individual parcels of land tonight relating to housing, but I'm going to give you an overview, and I'm going to just indicate to you how housing relates to the core strategy. So firstly, what is a core strategy? Firstly, the core strategy is a statutory requirement. I think I can the best example that you can see there on the right-hand side is like a tree. The trunk, the core strategy, holds up all the individual strategies within the plan, like branches branching off from this core. It acts as a guide for the plan. It sets out the goals for the spatial development throughout the county. It is required to be evidence-based, and it's required to have a settlement hierarchy. So what we need to define is, where are the biggest settlements? Where is the growth going to be? Obviously, we have Kilkenny City and we have Ferrybank, big, I suppose, built-up areas, big towns. But we also have a range of settlements throughout the county, and we have to prioritize them in terms of development. Very important, the plan has to be consistent with national and regional plans, as Dennis alluded to there, and I will go into a little bit more detail on that later. It will include housing and population targets for the county, for all the settlements, but these have to be evidence-based. They cannot just be, I suppose, how we feel, or where we feel development should take place. It's usually, past performance is a good indicator of future development. So has the city grown? Is it likely to grow at the same pace? And does it comply with national objectives? And then also rural development. Where is rural development going to take place? And is it in compliance with the National Planning Framework and Sustainable Rural Housing Guidelines? John, I have a problem there. I don't seem to be able to go to the next.
Okay, do you want to try and you got through to it? No?
There it is, yeah.
Okay.
So the core strategy also has to have a reference to retail. And as Dennis said earlier, we have further workshops. The retail strategy and economy will be discussed at our next workshop. And then also roads and rail have to be indicated, classified, and where future development will be. So these are subjects for our future workshops. So firstly, the range of plans. The plan has to be consistent with national, regional, and local plans. The National Planning Framework sets out several objectives, national objectives that have to be met. Those are taken down, I suppose, to regional level in the regional spatial and economic strategy. And then we, as a local level, have to include those in the development plan and then also in local area plans. So what does the National Planning Framework try to achieve? Firstly, the national plan is that there be 1 million additional people by 2040. Dublin has been dominating over the last few years, and so I suppose it is to restructure development and to make sure that there's a better balance throughout the country. You have Dublin, Galway, Limerick, Cork and Waterford as major cities, And these will then be allocated 50% of the national growth, with the other 50% going to the remainder of the country. Now Kilkenny is part of the remainder, so there, as a key settlement, Kilkenny City will be growing at 30%, and the Waterford area as a city will be growing by 50%. So what are the changes between this development plan and previous development plans? Firstly, now the priority is a low carbon agenda. The council has subscribed to a climate change charter. We have to make sure that all our objectives include the low carbon agenda. We have signed the Covenant of Mayors. It's a voluntary covenant, but it does give an indication as to what our motivation is in terms of meeting carbon objectives. Then also there will be a modal shift away from the private car, and that we will now follow an integrated approach to zoning of new lands, which, as I said earlier, it has to be evidence-based. It has to be based on infill and higher densities with sequential growth from the center outwards, and that all zoning of land will have to be on a tiered basis. We will have tier 1 and tier 2, and all these lands have to be serviceable in the next 5 or 6 years, the period of the plan. If land cannot be serviced over the period of the plan, it cannot be zoned. Now we have a few legacy issues around Kilkenny, and those will be dealt with in this plan, but in future plans, I suppose the driving force will be the infrastructure assessment. Now, what are the national strategic outcomes of the national planning framework? As I said, compact growth, spatial efficiencies arising from compact growth, strengthening of the rural economy, sustainable mobility, and then a strong economy supported by enterprise, innovation and skills, enhanced amenity and heritage, and a transition to a low carbon, climate resilient society. These are, I suppose, the driving forces behind this plan. Now, when we consider the national objective of 1 million people by 2040, 1 million additional people by 2040, all the regional authorities have been allocated growth figures, and those then have been, I suppose, the individual counties within those regional authorities have also been allocated growth figures. So when we look at the census figures from 2016, Kilkenny County had 99,232 people, and the city 26,512. In accordance with those projections to 2040, if you take a linear projection, it is likely that Kilkenny will have around 111,000 people by 2027, and that the city would have around 30,000 people by 2027. If we look at that growth figure, you'll see there in the second column, the growth figure for the county then is 11,842 to 2027, and the city 3,641. Now, as I said, it's evidence-based, so these allocations will determine how much land we can zone throughout the city, for instance. And you can see there the requirement is about 37.8 hectares for Kilkenny City. 30% of that has to be within the existing city boundary. It has to be infill development, and 70% of that can be outside the city, the existing built-up boundary. Now that boundary is defined by the CSO currently, and it might change in future census, but that's what we're working according to. The plan currently provides for 39 hectares. And as I said, there are some legacy issues, existing planning permissions, which we cannot ignore. So there's a slight overzoning, but we have informed the planning regulator of that. Those figures then, when you go down to the district town level, we anticipate that Callan can, up to 2027, accommodate an additional 441 people, Castlecombe 264, Graignamanagh 278, and Thomastown 437. And there on the far right, you can see what that equates to in terms of zoning. Now, we have local area plans for those settlements, and some of those local area plans will have to be readjusted to comply with these new projections. The smallest settlements, and I'll speak on them a bit later, we think that there's approximate growth capacity for about 1,284 people. And then the remainder of the rural area, about 4,000 additional people. Now, one of the requirements of the core strategy is that there has to be a settlement hierarchy. As I said earlier, that is what determines your priorities in terms of where people will be living. Kilkenny is a significant key town. Then we have the Ferrybank area of Waterford. And then we have the towns in excess of 1,500. These are Callan, Castlecombe, Graignamanagh, Tinninch and Carlow, but we're doing a single plan for the two settlements. Thomastown and the environs of New Ross. These all have local area plans, which means in these we zone lands and we do not include those zonings in the county plan. And then you have the next tier, which is towns and villages under 1,500. And we have identified 22 of those, and I'll speak on that later. And then you have your rural nodes and the wider area. So in terms of priority, the city first, and then it goes down in terms of numbers. Now, in terms of urban development, for the towns over 1,500, Kilkenny City has as volume 2 of this plan, has its own development plan. Ferrybank, then Ferrybank will form part of the Waterford metropolitan area, and what is called the Metropolitan Area Strategic Plan. And you can see there on the right-hand side, the area above the black line is the Ferrybank area of the metropolitan area. And we are in time going to revise our plan for Ferrybank to include all those areas following consultation with Waterford. Then Callan currently has a local area plan, which was completed in 2019, Castlecombe 2018, Thomastown also 2019, and we're currently reviewing the Graignamanagh plan, and that will be finished this year and it will run until 2027. We have agreed with Wexford that the environs of New Ross will be reviewed when the New Ross plan is reviewed. So it'll be a plan that we will do in conjunction with Wexford. This is just an indication of the 4 plans that we have completed, including Graignamanagh, which is in draft. Just an indication of the zonings there. Now, what is the urban strategy? Now, we have to ensure that sufficient land is zoned for housing. We have to subscribe to the principle of compact growth as required by the National Planning Framework. We have to improve walking and cycling opportunities, which is referred to generally as the modal shift away from the car. We are focusing on the public realm and placemaking, and then densification, which is, I suppose, a new focus and infill development. How do we achieve this? An adequate mix of house types and higher densities is required. Housing strategy provides for various needs in housing groups. These are required to be facilitated. Older people, people with disabilities, social housing. Currently, 10% of all new developments is required for social housing. Development for single people, students, and then the traveling community. One of the main, I suppose, mechanisms we have is a shift towards universal design. Is also referred to as a cradle to the grave design, catering for young people, people of all stages of life up to the elderly, looking at mobility, making sure houses are accessible, etc. The activation measures, we as a local authority are required by statute now to be involved in active land management. And many of you might have heard about the vacant site levy, which is a levy that is imposed on land, which is imposed on land that is vacant and zoned for residential, and that is to activate the land, I suppose, making land available for housing development. Then, in terms of rural development, rural housing, these are towns under 1,500, and they're not zoned. There is a national objective, and it's Objective 18B. It says that local authorities have to develop a program for new homes in small villages and towns with public infrastructure agencies such as Irish Water and local communities to provide service sites with appropriate infrastructure to attract people to build their own homes and live in small towns and villages. This is, I suppose, a shift in policy where we are trying to accommodate more people to make these villages more viable, more vibrant, and to ensure that social and economic facilities in those become sustainable. The local shop, the local school, etc. So we have identified 22 small settlements ranging from Ballyhale to Urlingford. You can see them there. What we are doing is we are drawing a line, a development, I suppose, boundary around these settlements, wherein development can take place. Now, obviously, this development is dependent on the availability of infrastructure, water, wastewater, and that'll guide, what is achievable in these settlements. We are working with Irish Water at the moment to try and prioritize these settlements to make sure that this policy is implementable. And then the next is rural nodes. They're smaller settlements, maybe just a crossroads, a few houses, maybe a school, etc. And the rural housing policy will apply in that, whereas it does not apply within these settlement boundaries. And that is one of the activation measures, I suppose, we have. In terms of single housing in the countryside, under the last plan, we granted around 950 rural houses. And as I said, past performance is a good indicator of future performance. We think that there will be a similar amount of houses applied for in the open countryside as one-off houses during the next plan. So we are gearing up for that. There is a national policy objective in the national planning framework, which sets out the requirements for, I suppose, complying with rural housing policy. And that identifies two areas. One is an urban area under urban influence, and then other areas. Areas of urban influence is people with an economic and a social need to live in those areas. And then the other areas is areas where, based on siting and design only, all housing would be achieved. So people applying for one-off houses will still be required to comply with the rural housing policy, and that rural housing policy will still be in accordance with sustainable rural housing guidance, which hasn't been reviewed, but we understand might be reviewed very soon. But we have this, I suppose, this guidance in the national planning framework as to where the policy is going. So we've accommodated that in this development plan. Now, this is just an indication of the growth that was achieved under the last plan between 2011 and 2016. This is the growth in the rural areas. You'll see the lightest areas there is where there was no growth, and then the darker areas was up to 140% of growth. So that's significant growth throughout the county in all rural areas. Now, in order to the requirement of the core strategy is that we have a core strategy map indicating these areas under urban pressure, and also the other areas. So you'll see there the pink area is the area identified as the area under urban pressure. The blue area is the remainder of the county. This was achieved by looking at commuter patterns, seeing where people commute from and where they commute to, where they work, etc. So you can see that there's a significant number of people in these rural areas that are dependent on the on commuting and working in the settlements. So that's our core strategy map. It also shows the settlement hierarchy. It's a bit small there, I suppose, for you all to see, but you can see at the bottom there, you can see the hatched area is the metropolitan area under the metropolitan area strategic plan, and then you have your 22 smaller settlements indicated there as well, and then Kilkenny City. So that in brief is the core strategy for the county. As I said, some aspects like the economy, etc., and transport will be discussed in further workshops. And I'm now going to hand over to Dennis just to discuss the core strategy on Kilkenny City. So Dennis.
Okay, thanks, Nicholas. So I'm going to bring back the focus to the city just for two reasons. One, just because it's the main urban area within the county, but also just to give flesh to some of the ideas that Nicholas was talking about there. So if I go back to the idea of accommodating extra people as part of the core strategy and planning within the city, as Nicholas outlined, 3,641 people, and how that spills out, that generates a housing need of 1,320 odd houses, which, as Nicholas pointed out, is about 37 hectares, and that'll be split between inside the CSO boundary and outside, and in a greenfield scenario. So we'd be aim at a minimum density of about 14 to the acre, or 35 units per hectare. And then the core strategy would also, as Nicholas had pointed out, we've identified the employment location. So you have Abbey Quarter, McDonough Junction in the city centre, the city centre core area itself in terms of retail, small office and so on. Places like Purcell's Inch, Lochby, Smith's Lands, Hebron Industrial Estate and Business Park. And out on the Freshwood Road, you'd have facilities like the hospital and some warehousing units out there. So, next slide, Nicholas, please. So for the city, the way the thing is structured is we have the concept of a 4 neighbourhood strategy. So we have 4 neighbourhoods around the city centre. So those 4 neighbourhoods are Lochby, New Park, the Powellgower Wetlands area, now known as the Brega Valley, and Loch McCask. And again, the whole in that developing the concept of what we call a 10-minute city, and developing a sequential approach to development, and then thereby maintaining compact growth. Next, Nicholas. So this is a representation then of that core strategy. So you see on the outer line, the thick outer line, that's the development boundary of the city, and then in the green blobs you see there the city centre and the 4 neighbourhoods on the quadrants around that city centre. So you have New Park up in the northeast, which is essentially more or less built out. The same for Lochby, which has been built out again, going back starting in the 70s and 80s, New Park in the 80s and 90s. And then the focus for the next development plan will be the Brega Valley and Loch McCask on the western side of the city. So yeah, Nicholas, next, go on. So just to focus on the compact growth again, and the idea of the 10-minute city. So what does a 10-minute city mean? So it means that if I'm living in Kilkenny City, that I should be within 10 minutes walking or cycling or public transport to where I go to school, where I go to the park or my sports facilities, where I want to work and where I need to shop or any other activity like that. And that's what we're trying to achieve, and moving more strongly towards that concept. So that's something that we actually initiated back in 2014, but this has been given much more emphasis and I suppose a push on by central government as well, looking at these concepts. So what you'll see in the regional spatial economic strategy, this concept of the 10-minute city or town has been brought forward at regional level. And also recently, you might have seen in the newspapers and in commentary in Dublin City, they're now talking about this, the 15-minute city. So this concept of the 10-minute city is something that is quite achievable in Kilkenny, given its compact nature to date. So next, Nicholas, yeah. So after that consideration, what you end up with then is this zoning map. So it's so on the left you'll see, over here on the left you'll see my cursor going around there. That's Loch McCask. So we have a certain amount of land here zoned for residential development, and in the Brega Valley we have a certain amount of land zoned for residential development, and then that'll accommodate the 70% of the increase, with the remainder 30% spread within then the existing built up area. Yes, Nicholas, yeah, move on. So I suppose for tonight's, the message for tonight is have your say. You can view the documents on that web address there, consult.kilkenny.ie or ourplan.kilkenny.ie. The plan is on public display until the 12th of March, and we would encourage you to get involved in the process, have a consideration to view the plan on Consult or on our plan and make your submission. Let's move on, Nicholas. Next. So on the last slide, you can make submissions in 3 ways. You can go directly to consult.kilkenny.ie and upload your submission directly to the website there. You can make it by email to ourplan@kilkennycoco.ie, or you can, in the traditional method, send it by post to the Draft City and County Development Plan, Planning Department, Kilkenny County Council, John Street, Kilkenny. So with that, I know there's a lot of information there to be digested in one night, and what it was is it was a quick run through. So obviously there's a lot more detail in the plan itself. So I would encourage you to have a look at the documentation and get involved in the process and make your submissions. And thank you for listening. So I'll hand you back to you, John.
Thanks very much, Dennis. That was Dennis Malone, and before that you heard Nicholas Lowe, who's Senior Executive Planner. Just a reminder that this is all part of a process, and just to explain, and I see some questions starting to come in and we'll deal with those in a second, but this is part of a process, and after these meetings are concluded, which conclude around the 8th of February is the last one. From then, there are 12 weeks for which the county manager will prepare a report on the process and revert to the members, the elected members of Kilkenny County Council, who then adjudicate on the various observations that are made and revert with amendments. And then the proposed amendments then go back on public display. And then there's another consultation process and another opportunity for people to input or make their observations on those proposed amendments before there's a final manager's report, which goes back with recommendations to the elected members of the councils, and then they have the opportunity to make further amendments before the plan is adopted. Now, just to explain what we're going to do now, we're going to have an open session, and so this is of course online, and it's, I think, the first time in the history of Kilkenny County Council that the core strategy would have been discussed in this way in a public forum. So it's a bit different from meeting in the public chamber in City Hall in Kilkenny or in County Hall, for example. So you have 2 options to ask a question or to make an observation. You can do so in person, and we would ask you to put on your camera if you were doing so we can see the people who are making a contribution. And we would ask you, if you wish to make a contribution, to raise your hand virtually, which you can do by pressing the icon at the top of your screen, which is simply like that. You will see it. I see it just over Naomi's head there. So you can raise your hand and we will make note of you wanting to make a contribution, and you can do so verbally, or you can type into the comments scheme and ask or the comments column, which is to the right of your screen, and type out a question. And throughout it all, we would ask people who are making verbal inputs to keep them as short as possible, and to try and frame them in terms of a question. And while we are all online, and we know online through Facebook and Twitter and all that can be a very toxic environment, we want to keep it all very civil. And so we'd ask people to respect the normal rules of engagement and courtesy and affording people an opportunity to speak and so on. So I'm just going to start working my way through some of the questions. And I think, I'm not sure whether it's to you, Nicholas, or you, Dennis, but I think it was answered in your presentation implicitly, Nicholas, but a question came from Christopher, who asked, Kilkenny City is designated as a census town. Are you required to prepare a local area plan for the city? You indicated that there is a plan for the city, but I'm not too sure whether it's separate to that. Nicholas?
John, Kilkenny City is getting its own development plan, which is a step above a local area plan, and that is volume 2 of this plan. So yes, it is I suppose a status of a similar status as the county plan.
Okay. I hope, Chris, for that answers your question. You can let us know if that doesn't. Okay. Well, if Christopher wants to indicate one way or the other. Lucy Glendenning, I'm not too sure if that's a question but it seems to be the posting of a link. If you'd like to maybe indicate, you can do so verbally. Lucy has made a post, guidelines from public consultation in 2015 on Abbey Quarter for interest. So I presume that is just a link to previous consultations. I'm not sure.
Yeah, will I answer, John?
Yeah, please, Lucy.
I'm sorry, my camera won't turn on. There's a problem with my link. Yeah, I have it was sent on by the council, and it was interesting because I went to those consultations. So there's quite a lot of information in there, which the council sent out to us afterwards, and I just thought people might be interested to see it. Okay,
thank you very much. I don't know if anyone from the council wishes to make a comment in relation to that.
I could just a quick comment on that. Yeah.
Dennis, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. And they were fairly extensive public consultations at the time, I remember. And I suppose what I would say is that the landscape has changed quite a bit. In a normal course of events, we'd be doing something like that again in terms of public meetings and so on, if COVID-19 wasn't around. But I do think actually that tonight's session and the session we had with Greg Manna, it's a very significant turnout again, given that we have 99 people registered for this event, and by all means we're trying to explore as many ways as possible to engage with the public, and this is obviously one way that we've used. So, but thanks for the information on the guidelines. It's well worth bringing that to highlight again. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Dennis, and thanks, Lucy, for that. Anybody, if you haven't seen it, you can click on it there. It's in the comments box. Just a reminder to you, if you'd like to make a verbal contribution, just click the icon, raise your hand, which is at the top. I think Councillor Maria Dollard has raised her hand. I'll come to you in a minute.
No, sorry, that was by accident. I was trying to look at the chat. Sorry.
Oh, great. No problem at all. Just there is a query in from Mairead, and Mairead says, I have a query with regard to the Castlecomer Kilkenny Road. Is tonight the right forum to address this, or will transport be dealt with on another night? And thank you, Mairead. Dennis, I don't know if that's the...
Well, we do have a particular a session on transport within the city and the county on one of the other nights. I can't remember off the top of my head which one it is. So that would probably be the most appropriate avenue for addressing that query.
That's on Thursday, the 4th of February, where
so,
at 7 o'clock. So if you look for an event marked climate, It's covering climate change, renewable energy, and transport. But I don't know if
If she wants to elaborate on the question.
yeah, if you'd like to
well,
elaborate on it, Mairead.
Yeah, well, in general transport on the fourth, yeah.
Okay, well,
Hello, hi. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, no, thanks for the presentation. It's been really informative. I suppose I see one of the plans is the Dunmore Biodiversity and Recreation Park, which hopefully will be a huge addition to Kilkenny. But one, I suppose, slightly disappointing, I read through the reports, and one slightly disappointing aspect was that there doesn't seem to be many plans for the road between Dunmore and Kilkenny City. I know if we're trying to encourage people to walk and to cycle, to have cycle lanes or footpaths between Kilkenny and Dunmore would be a huge amenity. Basically now people are mostly walking on the ring road, you know, that's where they go for exercise, and to be able to walk out or bring kids, cycle out to Dunmore would be huge. So I'm just wondering, are there any plans for that stretch of road?
Well, I'll take that one, Nicholas. Yeah, so yeah, the biodiversity park will be should be a great amenity, you know, for the city, and getting to the Dunmore amenity biodiversity park is an issue. So one of the main way we're trying to encourage it actually is by cycling and walking. So rather than trying to accommodate cyclists on the N77, we'll be directing them off from the other side to come from town out the Bleach Road, out that direction, and to come in at it cycling from that direction. So it is the I suppose the safety of cyclists on the N77 is something that's going to have to be looked at. So that proposal is still a proposal, if you know what I mean. It's still going through its planning consent, and that process is ongoing. And I think the submissions are still open on that, as far as I remember. But in terms of the strategy, the long-term strategy would be to have that strong connection from the biodiversity park back into town through the Bleach Road and by the side of the river. You know, long-term doing our linear park up that side of the river, connecting out onto the Bleach Road, and you get out that way. So cycling and walking out to the Bleach Road, and the emphasis off traveling there by car. So we're, you know, in the longer term, we're trying to encourage people to get out on the bike, cycle out to it, walk out to it, and that will be the main thing. Notwithstanding that there will be obviously people that will travel by car, but that will be the lesser of the way we'd hope that people would access it.
Okay, thanks, Dennis.
Would you mind if I asked just really quickly, are there any plans? Just that road is probably the most busy road into Kilkenny, and probably the most neglected road. You know, I can't remember any upgrading of that road, you know, in living memory. Are there any plans for that road?
Yeah, so it is a national road. That's the first thing to remember. So the funding of that doesn't come through the council, it comes through the TII. And I suppose there has been a phased upgrade of that N77 between Kilkenny and the county boundary with Durrow. So in the previous years, there was a very bad stretch there from Durrow, from the county boundary back to Ballinaslee. That was completed there a couple of years ago. The next phase of that will be linking from that back into Ballyragget. And then a number of years ago, again, obviously the roundabout was put in that when that junction was a normal T junction, so that roundabout was put in. So there is a program there, right, to improve that. And I'm not sure, I'm not in the roads directorate, so I wouldn't be able to give you a chapter and verse, but there is a program of improving that N77. There's a recognition that obviously it's substandard in width and alignment, and that has to be brought up, but obviously dependent on national funding as well.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you.
Can I just ask Dennis, Mairead there, you know, she said that when she looked at the plan, she was disappointed to see the lack of something about the road. How, you know, is her expressing her disappointment, if she puts it in writing, will that be considered as a submission? And what's the process for
of course, it'll be considered as a submission, but what I would say is that certainly, you know, we have objectives in the plan and about the upgrade of national routes and so on. The problem from the council's perspective is that we don't have the final say in those projects. So national projects are governed by funding from the TII. So the hierarchy and where that sits in a priority, you know, is something, I suppose, outside of direct control of the council.
And is
but
it
would
open to the council to make representations?
Yeah,
then?
so the council would lobby for and make a case for. So one of the issues around the N77 is that it's actually quite an important national secondary route link. So to get up to the Midlands, so you're talking about Ballyragget, Durrow, Portlaoise, and on to the N7.
Yeah.
So it's a route that people would follow maybe if they were going to even Limerick. You know, I've often driven myself up that way. Used to have a son down in UL, so he used to take me up to Bellin's, Borris and Ossory, up that way and across and down into the N7. So it's quite an important strategic link. So that's the kind of lobbying that would happen with the TII to say this needs funding because it's this strategic link from one major metropolitan area up to Portlaoise and onto the N7, which further links onto other urban areas.
Okay, thank you. A couple of more plans. I think this one, or questions, sorry, I think this one also deals in terms of traffic and transport. It comes from Angela Lawler, referencing the 10-minute city, and she said there's a proposed plan to build a new school, cut off a community access road into the city and push even more traffic to the Freshford Road. That road is far too busy. So I don't know, Dennis, that's not a question, it seems an observation.
Yeah, okay, it's a fair enough observation, and so that so as it's fairly well known, I suppose at this stage, is that the CBS school have a site out onto Dunningstown Road, and we at the moment that's part of our Loch McCask master plan area, and as part of the access route into the site, there's a proposal to bring a connection from the Freshford Road into the site and across the Dunningstown Road. Now, the exact, I haven't seen, I know that's still in design phase. I haven't seen actually any design documents around that yet. So that'll be a planning application that will have to go through its normal process around the school itself, and the council will be doing a Part 8 over from the access road over from the Freshford Road over to the Dunningstown Road. So I haven't got the detail of how that junction with the Dunningstown Road will actually pan out. So it could be a question of making that. So if you're coming into Dunningstown Road, you might have to turn out onto the Freshford Road to get into the city rather than coming down the Dunningstown Road into the Granges Road. So but I haven't seen the final design detail on that, and that's a design detail. So it's not something that I'd be able to, give a full answer to tonight. There'll be a process around that in itself.
Okay.
So I know that probably doesn't sound very satisfactory, but it's the best I can kind of do tonight anyway.
Okay.
So just to go back on the concept of 10-minute city. So the school there, it will be located in the Loch McCask area. So again, the design around the school and its location and its connection back to the city is important. So again, we'd be looking at trying to maximize connections to that school, both cycling and pedestrian, from the likes of the Granges Road, from the likes of the Tullerone Road up through Lousy Bush Lane and so on. So it's not a question of giving the car the priority. The question actually is the opposite. We're trying to make the school much more accessible in terms of location and accessibility, and actually to dumb down the use of the car. So we don't really want people driving to the school. We want people to be able to walk or cycle to the school. And that's really the emphasis will be.
Okay. There's a question from Mary Fitzgerald looking for clarification. I'm not too sure if it's to you, Nicholas, or to you, Dennis, but it's in relation to a comment that was made about a surplus of zoned land in Kilkenny. And Mary Fitzgerald wants to know how much of a surplus is there. Could someone explain that? Is that you, Nicholas?
I can take that, yes. The requirement for zoning is around 37 hectares. And as I said, we had to take into consideration extant planning permissions, which are, they have a legal right to develop. So we zoned around 39, which is about 2 hectares. It's not very much in the bigger scope of things. So yeah, it is very small, but you know, that this is an issue that we are discussing with the planning regulator, who issues guidance on these matters. So we're not worried that we are, you know, that this wasn't a free for all, etc. It's based on evidence of what is required, and it's a thorough. We had to also look at you know, the availability of infrastructure. So what lands can be zoned, and I don't think we've added any additional lands from the last plan. We've possibly taken away lands where planning permissions have lapsed. So that's the position.
Okay, Nicholas, hopefully Mary, that addressed your question. This is a question from Olga concerning smaller areas, and she said, is anything planned in the Glenmore, Tullogher, Rower area? Olga, I'm not too sure who would answer that. Dennis?
Yeah, so I can take that. So for the rural area, Glenmore. So Glenmore is one of the smaller settlements that we have. It's below the tier of towns with a defined boundary. So where we have that is positioned is in the context of, you know, the delivery of service sites. And Glenmore is, if I'm not mistaken, I think has an objective to and is committed for a public Irish water treatment facility into the future. So that if that happens, and it will happen, it's in Irish Water's programme for infrastructure development. That will allow then, you know, the provision of service sites in Glenmore. So one of the things that you would look at there is the opening up of Glenmore to the provision of service sites on a scale that you know is appropriate to the level of service there. So Glenmore does have a school, has a church, used to have a creamery, that's closed down, but you know, so it has a modicum of social services that could accommodate a certain level of population. And so we'd be trying to encourage the idea of service sites and releasing more land in Glenmore to deal with local demand there for local housing, you know, rural housing. I suppose it would be that is covered in. We have a general policy around that for all those types of settlements. So I think you mentioned the Roar, was it the Roar in Ishtig?
Yeah.
Mentioned? Yeah. So in particular, what we will be doing this year is producing a guidance document about providing service sites within villages like that. And it's our intention actually to use the Roar in Ishtig as an exemplar in that. So we'll be focusing on the Roar in Ishtig in producing that guidance document.
Okay, Dennis, thank you. And now Mairead had asked earlier on, didn't ask, but brought up about the Kilkenny Biodiversity and Recreational Countryside Park at Dunmore, which does sound very inviting to be able to get beyond the old 5 kilometres and out to Dunmore. I'm not too sure what distance exactly Dunmore is from my house, but I haven't been out there for a while. But Katrina O'Sullivan from the planning section has helpfully put up a link there for anyone who wants to go onto it, and just to emphasise that submissions are welcome on that until the 5th of February. Now we're going to go back to some more questions. That question, Lucy Glendenning has 2 questions in, I think. Number 1, Lucy says that permission for a large hotel has been given on the brewery site. Also, a large car park has also been applied for. What does this mean regarding plans for social housing within the brewery site? And Lucy also asks, in relation to Vision for Rural Cycling report that was sent to the council before Christmas, will this be included or considered, I suppose, as part of the plan? So perhaps if
John, could I just add one tiny thing to the car park? I was just wondering how another car park is justified when there's so much unused space in McDonough and Market Cross. So that could be part of the same question. Thank you.
Okay, well, there's an assertion there. I'm not too sure whether if anyone wants to address that.
Yeah.
Dennis?
Yes, so I can take that. Yeah. So just dealing with the hotel at first. So we don't have a hotel granted planning on the brewery site at the moment, or in the Abbey Quarter master plan. Now there is, I know there's been permission for an extension to an existing hotel off Vicar Street, but there isn't any proposal at the moment for a hotel in the Abbey Quarter area. It's just to do that. And then in relation to the car park, so the car park, so as for referenced area, the master plan went back through a significant amount of public consultation and so on, and that was adopted back in 2015. And as part of that, a further exercise was undertaken on an urban design strategy for the brewery site, which gave an idea of how the different types of uses would be, if you like, rolled out during the development of the site. So if you take it that, I think the focus on here is the length of time, really. So if you think that we started the process actually in 2012. It took us until 2016, 2017 to get all the planning finished. That was 5 years. It's now 2020, and it's only now that the first building is actually coming on stream, along with the public park and the skate park. So we are making good progress there. But in the meantime, there is a certain amount of there's a delay in, when I say delay, it takes time to formulate proposals for the different plots within the site. So the idea of having meanwhile uses or temporary uses on the site is something that was agreed or passed during the plan and during the urban design strategy. So the idea is that, well, while you have a temporary use on site, it makes some use of the site. So in the car park in question, again, it's come through as a planning application, and I don't know whether it's out through the gate yet or not. Certainly, I think it might be within its appeal period, but the car park is just at a temporary use for 5 to 7 years. It'll actually, the benefit of it will be that it will allow some coach parking to take place down at St. Canice's Cathedral, which is something, is a long-term, long-term objective of the council to develop in developing up the medieval mile and the concept of, Kilkenny Castle to St. Canice's. So in that context, it'll have a short-term benefit. When tourists do come back. Just as an interesting thing, I saw, I think just in the Independent over the weekend, or it just was the Saturday's Independent, where St. Canice's was voted one of the most desirable places to go as a religious site, up there with Machu Picchu in Peru. So I thought I was quite impressed with that one. So, and you can see from St. Canice's itself, I think over the last couple of years, the number of visitors is starting to grow there significantly. So to be able to facilitate that down there, at least on a temporary basis, is probably a good thing, I think. I mean, I take Lucy's point about the car parks that are around, but this has a particular use to it, a particular point.
What does it mean in relation to social housing, Dennis? Are there implications?
There isn't any implications there. So in the master plan, and going back to the urban design, the target is to achieve a 33% of the development built out there as housing. So it's certainly something that we need to achieve that. Again, the concept of mixed use. So in it. So you'll have workers there, you'll have students there. Hopefully, if we get a third level college or an element of a third level college there, we'll have people living there, have the library there.
So the plan is that there will be an element of social housing.
Well, for me, it's housing. It doesn't matter to me whether it's social or private or whatever. I don't make a distinction really between social, and for me, it's housing. We need people living in the city.
Okay.
And I don't really mind whether it's social or private housing or whatever. We need people living in there.
I think Paddy is raising his hand, wishes to say something. I just wish to clarify. I think Brian Hamilton said that Lucy is referring to a hotel proposed for New Street, but I think, Brian, her question was actually in relation to a hotel on the brewery site, as far as I could see.
Yeah, can I just quickly go in there? Yeah, I mean, I know it's not on the brewery site, but it's so big. I mean, I'm sure everyone's seen the plans for it. It's really huge hotel.
Sorry, which are you referring to? Because Brian is referring to
the entrance. Well, the entrance I think is going to come off the St. Francis Bridge, the Cass Bridge.
No, Brian Hamilton is actually said, I think Lucy is referring to the proposed hotel on New Street, which is just there off the Ormond Road. Is that right? No?
Off the Ormond Road? No.
Just a clarification for Brian, that's all.
Yeah, no, I believe that's one. Thank you.
Okay. There's a sorry, Paddy, you had your hand up. Do you want to say something?
Yes, just a question on the service sites and the distance from the towns. And you mentioned the road in the Steeg. There are very good examples in the Steeg of service sites that was provided. And the distance from the centre. Now, this is something that's lacking in Thomastown and has been down to the years of service sites.
Sorry, so are you referring then, Paddy, to the lack of service sites in Thomastown? Is that it? Yeah. So is there any element of the plan that addresses that, or where should people like Paddy make their feelings?
Certainly, I know Paddy's made some submissions before in the pre-draft stage around this as well. So in the Thomastown local area plan, we would have dealt with that kind of material, but certainly it can be raised again as an issue because we do have a bigger allocation given to Thomastown under this plan, having reviewed the population allocation for the county. We have given an extra, I can't remember the exact figure, but an extra allocation of population. So we will need to revisit that zoning requirement in Thomastown. And part of that would be, the provision of service sites. So that, and I'm just trying to remember, was there a specific location in Thomastown? Maybe you, Nicholas, can you do that?
Yes, Dennis. We allocated a site of 2 hectares in Thomastown next to the primary school for service sites at a low density of 10 units per hectare. So that's zoned as low density residential in Thomastown local area plan.
I suppose what I would just come back in on that, the important thing about that then is through our active land management policies, as Nicholas was referring to earlier, we need to be ensuring that site becomes active over the course of the plan period and that it isn't just left idle. So that's where I'd be going to. But certainly, if you, another submission, we welcome any submission, but, if you want to make a case around Thomastown and service sites, that will be looked at again.
Paddy, you want to come back in?
Yeah, well, just a question, because it says it was a 10-minute city living, right? 10 minutes in Thomastown opens up an entire alternative lifestyle. The site that I had mentioned in the submission is the same distance from the bridge of Thomastown as it is to Lidl, as it is from the bridge of Thomastown to the site. But the site was excluded because it was outside the Thomastown area plan, right? So it's just, and it is the question as well about service and land. Is it in the 7-year service plan? that would land in that area be serviced in 7 years' time, or should we be looking if it's
So
a site of this? Yeah, go ahead.
Dennis, yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
fair enough. I heard most of that there. You broke up a little bit at the end, Paddy, but yeah, no, it's I take your, and I remember the site, so I think you're dead right. It was outside, so because it was outside a development area, it more or less then it wasn't, you know, adequately serviced. It was excluded. But if you want us to have a look at it again, by all means, you know, make your case for it. So if you're saying that it's, well, the same distance from the bridge in Thomastown as Lidl is, well, let's have a look at that and see, you know, is that the case or how is that the case? But I think, remember, there was no foul sewer out there. I think that was one of the issues that we had with it. Anyway, I'm grappling to remember the detail. But by all means, you know, if you think there's a case to be answered there, make another submission and we'll certainly have a fresh look at it.
Okay, thank you, Paddy. Mary Rice has asked a question. She says, given the focus on sustainability and climate change, I'm wondering why the level of one-off housing will continue at current rates. And she says that she feels that this type of development is unsustainable and appears to conflict with stated objectives of encouraging people build their own homes in rural towns and villages. So I suppose what needs clarification there is, Mary says, is why the level of one-off housing will continue at current rates. Does the plan envisage that the level of one-off housing will continue at current rates? Can I put that, Nicholas?
Can I take that? Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what the National Planning Framework requires of us is to create opportunities for people that would normally, I suppose, be building a one-off house, to find opportunity in settlements, and to create an alternative for those people. So we hope that people will be pulled towards these settlements. The amenities and the services available there would encourage people to settle there rather than build a one-off house in an area just because they can get a rural site to build the house of their dreams. Because I think that's the intention of many people in rural areas, is that they cannot find in urban areas or in settlements what they hope to, you know, to build. So it is more of trying to encourage people to settle in these settlements and to create facilities for them. The National Planning Framework obviously still provides for people with an economic and a social need. Now, it's hard to anticipate what the amount of housing required for those needs will amount to over the period of the plan. But we hope that we can, I suppose it's a ship that we have to turn slowly. It's not going to change in one plan. The Sustainable Rural Housing Guidelines have not changed yet, even though there is a drive at national for people to live in settlements rather than in the countryside. The guidance documents still have to change before we can start implementing those changes. But I suppose at the moment, we anticipate that there will still be a large number of one-offs for people that actually comply with the policy.
Okay, but you're saying that there is uncertainty over the level because a lot of it depends on circumstance.
It depends on how successful these settlements turn out to be, you know, and if we can activate those lands and get the service sites going, because we believe that people will choose to live in settlements rather than in the countryside. But we're not going to tell people that comply with the policy that they're not going to be able to build there because they have to go to the settlements.
Okay. Hope that deals with that question.
Sorry, John. Sorry, John.
Sorry.
Sorry, John. Can I just come back on that? I suppose
I don't know who's talking. Could you?
Mary Rice.
Mary Rice, John.
Oh, Mary, how are you? Would you like to turn on your camera there, Mary?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, I suppose, that again, just maybe to address the point of the you know, we have these overarching guidelines of sustainability and climate change, you know, the plans addressing the climate change. And I'm not sure how that ties in with what the answer that I've just been given. I suppose I feel it hasn't addressed it from that perspective.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, go on, Nicholas. Yeah.
Well, I do believe that the centralization of people in settlements does achieve spatial efficiencies, etc. Until the national guidance from the minister changes, which we've been told is under review, I suppose our hands are tied in terms of changing the rural housing policy extensively. But we have been given some indication as to where these things are going, and we have provided for that in the plan, where we say, there will be 2 areas under urban pressure, and it might mean that fewer people will comply with the policy. We don't know yet. It depends on what comes down from the minister in terms of identifying, criteria for compliance, and if that changes significantly.
Yeah.
Could I ask him, is it open to the elected members to put a limit on the amount of one-off housing?
Yeah, could I just add to that, John, as well,
Yeah.
and I'll address that? So just in the context, I think there has to be a recognition that we're still a very rural county and even a rural country. So if you take it that if you add up the towns and villages in the county, we're classing these as urban settlements. So everything over 1,500 people, which in a European context wouldn't class as a town even, but that's what we're using as a town in our definition. We're still around, I forget the exact figure, but it might be slightly ahead in urban terms. So about just over 50% of the population, or just under 50% of the population, will be classed as urban. So around the rest of the county is still rural. So in forming a rural housing policy, what you're trying to do is deal with the rural housing need generated by that cohort. And that revolves around people that have a social need to live in the rural countryside. In other words, I grew up in the area, I've lived in the area all my life, I've went to school there, and I can get a site, and I want to build, I want to stay where I am. And that's a reasonable expectation. And there's also then the need for in economic terms. So if I get a job in the school in Clara, or if I get the job in the school in Cuffs Grange or wherever, well, surely I can live close to where I work, and that's accommodated. So, and that's the idea of having an economic need, or it might be a rural-based business, tied to a particular occasion, i.e., a farmer. So there's always going to be a need for rural housing, and it's just to try and quantify it in a way that doesn't allow urban generated housing to move out to the countryside. And that's what the policy tries to do. And that would kind of get to what Mary is trying to, the question I think was Mary trying to get at. So we're trying to navigate around that policy to ensure that it's only people with a genuine rural housing need get a house in the countryside. And can the councillors make that policy? Yeah, of course they can, if they're the ones that decide the policy.
Okay. Can I ask, there's a question from Mark Collins. Is there a provision in the new city-specific development plan for amenity and recreational designated land to facilitate all these extra houses at the Eastern Environs development? So, question about the amenity area designated.
Yeah. So I think does he mention? Sorry, the question was that around the eastern area designated, is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I suppose when I was doing the little follow-up on the core strategy, I would have highlighted that in general in the eastern area, so up at New Park, northeast section, and Lochby, which will be kind of southeast, those areas have generally been built out. So, and we don't have particular significant proposals around recreational units in those locations, apart from linking into the Riverside Park and so on. So there are some particular projects around that, and upgrades maybe of the existing open spaces that are in those areas that would happen in a normal council event anyway, whether it's, so for instance, the provision of outdoor gyms. So if you walk up around Little there, you'll see over the last couple of years, you know, the patch was put around the open space and the gym was put in. That type of stuff would happen in the normal course of events. In the new housing, so most of the new housing will be directed to the western side of the city and in the Brega Valley. So there's certainly, in that context, there's a master plan for that area to be built out with, you know, pocket parks within the development blocks, but also you'll have the Brega Park, which will partially be delivered now with the new road out there. And then so as development rolls out, there is a requirement to deliver a certain amount, including amenity open space, as the development is rolled out. So there is there, and similar will happen up on the northern side of that, Loch McCask up in that area. So those planned areas would have that schedule of open space required to service those houses. I don't know if that answers the question, yeah?
Hopefully. I don't know if Mark would like to say anything. He's more than welcome. I can't see on the screen, Mark, so but if you want to put up your hand, we can come to you. No, I haven't seen anything. Okay, I'm not sure if I've dealt with this one already. It's from Lucy Glendenning. It relates to the temporary car park in the Mart site, and her post is saying that it's suggesting that if the plan is to encourage walking and cycling, why has the council applied for temporary car park when the Mart site, McDonagh Junction, would appear to have excess car parking?
Okay, so I did kind of answer that a little bit, but anyway, I'll go back again and just deal with that again. It goes back to the master plan for the Abbey Quarter and the urban design framework. So those types of uses, again, are allowed within those plots as the development is rolled out. So again, just coming back to make a distinction there, actually. So the council, that's one of the plots that has been handed over to the partnership. So it's the partnership have actually applied for the permission there, so just to make that distinction. And so again, it complies with the provisions of the urban design strategy and the master plan. So that permission is, you know, on a site that will, in the likelihood of events, won't be developed in the next 5 years. So the way it's planning out, so you have, at the moment, you have the brewery building being finished off. It'll be finished off, hopefully, COVID restrictions and all that, before the end of 2021. And then what will happen as well on the brewery site will be the new library will be commenced this year. That's in the pipeline. So that's on on the high street side of the Brega River. So this site is on the opposite side of the Brega. So so why leave it? You can leave it idle, or you could. But one of the uses that could be beneficial would be this temporary car park. And why is it beneficial? Well, we're transitioning from from a car-based city to we want to get to more friendly walking and cycling. But in the meantime, that car park will facilitate a very limited number of car spaces, but also that's idea of the coaches coming, which will deliver, tourists to that area, which go to see and then St. Canice and then bring them back up to it. So it has a dual purpose in that sense. So it makes use of a piece of ground on a 5 to 7 year time frame, and then we revert back to, I think in our post she talked about temporary car park. Once they become temporary, they never change. So I think in this case, just the land, it won't come if it remains a car park. It won't comply with the plan, so it cannot remain a car park.
Okay.
Thanks a million, Dennis. It just seems like for a temporary car park for 120 cars and 8 buses. I mean, again, I know you're saying we're transitioning, but that's bringing an awful lot more traffic into what is already quite a busy space. So it just, personally, I just don't think it makes sense when, I'm sure there could be other uses made for it, but it just, as I say, you look at, as I said, the temporary, why bring something in if it's going to be temporary, if you can do something permanent somewhere else and actually really encourage your cycling and your walking, because then if you actually create something somewhere else, that's much more long term. Whereas if you're looking, this is only going to be for 5 to 7 years. You know, I'm not sure that it's, you know, the best way to go, really. You know?
Okay, Lucy. Thanks for that. I think there is a planning application at the moment, so that will remains to be seen. Sorry now. Peter asks, is there any contingency plan in mind for areas that have been overlooked by Irish Water in the current plan? And I presume this refers to areas where people are seeking to make developments, but there isn't any provision for the serving of these areas by Irish Water. So what are the implications for the development of those particular areas, be they small settlements or areas of other areas, and can Kilkenny County Council help? Because presumably, I think it was referred to earlier on by Nicholas that, you know, it is a high priority of the council to try and sustain the viability of something like 25 different settlements. So and equally, it was mentioned about the provision of water services. So I don't know who'd like to take that, Nicholas.
Nicholas, yeah, I'll give that to you, Nicholas.
No, I suppose we are constantly in touch with Irish Water. We are trying to get them to prioritize these settlements for water and wastewater provision. Wastewater is the important one, I suppose. As a council, we've taken the decision that, you know, where you have a development of service sites, maybe it can be provided for by a private well, but the wastewater is the issue. The council is, as far as I understand, is not in the business of taking over wastewater treatment facilities. So it will be Irish Water. So unfortunately, then, where Irish Water
Teams app where you can book through Eventbrite, and that's on the topic of economic development, and it includes retail strategy and tourism. After that, on the 4th, so there's 2 next week, a busy week. It'll be covering climate change, renewable energy, and transport. And the final one, which is on Monday the 8th, it's natural and built heritage, placemaking, and all further issues. So you can check out Kilkenny County Council website. You know, do look at ourplan.kilkenny.ie, or you can email ourplan@kilkennycoco.ie. So I'm going to hand over. Oh, sorry, there was a question. Will there be a similar event on the Callan mobility plan? Sorry, that question was put earlier on by Pascal Bergen. Apologies, Pascal. Dennis, do you want to answer that, or Nicholas?
I can
Yeah,
answer.
Nicholas, go on, yeah.
The Callan mobility plan was an objective in the Callan local area plan, which is not, I suppose, part of this process. So the Callan plan is a separate process. The area engineer in Callan is running the process. So there will be a public participation process. Whether it will take the form of this meeting, I don't unfortunately know. But I know it is on public display as far as I know at present. So everybody is welcome to make some submissions on that as well.
Okay, so there's an ongoing consultation on it, but there's no plans at the moment.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, and apologies, Pascal, for not getting to your question sooner. Dennis, if you want to wrap up.
Yeah, so I just want a reminder, I suppose I'm going to share a screen with you again. And just first of all, just to thank everyone for their participation tonight. It was really worthwhile. I thought it was a good event. Just what the reminder I wanted to give you is just to, here we go, to make your submissions, having considered, go and look at the plan, first of all, in some detail. It's a big enough document. It runs to over 270 pages, and there's a lot in there. So give it your consideration. We'd welcome your submissions. And just to finish off with go to consult.kilkenny.ie. You can upload directly there. You can email us at ourplan@kilkennycoco.ie or by post. And I'd just like to thank John for his ever efficient chairmanship of these sessions. We drag out of him a lot for these things, and he'll be along for the other sessions as well. So he does a great job. I'd like to thank him for that. He keeps the show on the road. And just to thank everyone that participated, and thank the staff for my own team for getting the show, getting the show on the road and doing it all and keeping the thing going. So thanks everybody, and good night.
Thank you all, and don't forget to do spread the word about the other meetings, and do make your opinions heard by taking part through those various things. Thank you all from me, and hopefully we'll see you all again soon. Thanks very much, and good night, and safe downstairs.
Thank you very much.
Bye now. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye bye.